Alrighty, guys, we have waited a long time for this. Just around the corner, it is so incredibly hard to believe we are getting essentially a 4th season of the Netflix Daredevil show. It is incredible because I remember watching the first 3 seasons, not when they came out, but around 2019 or so, I caught up on Netflix and watched the first 2 seasons, watched The Defenders, and watched season 3. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I can't wait for another season. It's going to be great, only to find out the show had been canceled, along with everything else from Netflix. And yes, the MCU was moving on, the MCU was moving forward, but it was just really sad because the Daredevil Netflix series was really the first TV show I'd watched. And granted, I didn't watch a whole lot of TV before then, but it was one of the first TV shows that I'd watched that I went, oh wow, this is really, really good TV. So it was a bummer because I loved that show. I loved Daredevil, Karen, Foggy, obviously Kingpin and Daredevil's conflicts, Elektra, all the great stuff that they did in that show. I really, really enjoyed. But then come 2021, we had a little appearance from none other than Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, and then he appeared again in She-Hulk Attorney at Law, which I really liked. For those of you who, didn't like the show, I didn't love the show, but I really liked his appearance in there. And of course, he appeared for a brief second in the Echo show in a very cool action scene, I will say. And so, all of that to be building up towards Daredevil Born Again, essentially the 4th season, which originally wasn't going to be. It was originally going to be a separate rebooted version where it was just going to be taking place in sort of a parallel MCU where Kingpin and Matt Murdock looked the same, played by the same actors, but it was going to be different. But then they decided, you know what, we're going to retool it. It's part of all the quality over quantity kind of measures that the MCU has been going through. I think really ending with Captain America Brave New World and Daredevil Born Again, and of course Ironheart coming out later this year. And so now we're going to be getting a brand new Daredevil show that's going to be taking place in the MCU, but also going to be a continuation of the first 3 seasons, which is very exciting. So I thought, as we always like to do with the bigger shows and the bigger movies, I wanted to take a moment to do a predictions hopes and predictions segment here on the podcast, just to talk about some things I am really hoping for, and I think if they can stick these things, then it has a very good chance of being a good show in my eyes. And then some predictions, some things that either will happen or won't happen. I'm usually 50-50 on them. Granted, I don't make the most outlandish predictions. Like for Captain America Brave New World, I wasn't like, oh yeah, Thor's going to show up. I mean, that's not going to happen. These are informed predictions, so usually I'm pretty 50-50 on them, and so we'll see how we go from there. So let's get into the hopes. I have 5 hopes here, and then I have 5 predictions. Let's start with the hopes. Number 1, don't let violence be the big sell. Put the characters first. Look, the Daredevil show is not for kids. The first 3 seasons, at least. And I don't think this season is going to be either. And by kids, I mean, young kids, because it's going to be violent. It's going to be brutal. In fact, the showrunner of this new iteration of Daredevil, even though it's a continuation of the Netflix show, his last name's Scartapane, basically said, yeah, this is going to be even more violent than the Netflix show. And what I'm doing right now, not necessarily just for the YouTube channel, but more for my own, refreshing and just wanting to see the old show again. I'm actually rewatching the Netflix show, and I'm trying to catch up, so watch seasons 1 through 3 by the time season 4 or Daredevil Born Again ends, and so hopefully I'll get a better picture of the whole story going forward. But anyways, so the thing about that show is, yeah, it's incredibly violent. I mean, there is a lot of blood and gore and whatnot, but it never felt like violence was the sell of that show, right? If that makes sense. It feels weird to say because violence, yes, is a big part of the show, but it never felt like it was the big draw. Scartapane's comments, the showrunner of the new iteration, seem to indicate that violence is really the big sell of this new season. He's like, yeah, it's going to be the most violent thing that's ever, we've ever done. It's even more violent than the Netflix show. And, I mean, I don't know. People have different tolerances to violence in media. I'm personally a little more okay, being able to, not okay with violence, obviously, but being able to disassociate so that watching a film like Logan, for example, it's more about the character work and the story for me. There are some things I just can't watch, and there are some things that are really hard to watch for me. But, I'm never a fan of gratuitous violence. It's just gross, and it doesn't make me feel good. And so if that is really the sell, and that you're putting the characters on the back burner because of that, then I don't think that's a good thing. So I really will hope that the violence is, sure, keep the DNA of the original Daredevil, be gritty and street level, but keep the characters first. Second thing, this leads into the second thing. Second hope, it's all about the supporting cast. And I actually put this hope here after seeing the first couple episodes of season 1 and being reminded of that. The reason that Daredevil works as a show so well is, yes, Charlie Cox is amazing as Daredevil, and yes, Vincent D'Onofrio is great as Kingpin, but it's the supporting cast. And that's why it was such a great move to bring back Deborah Ann Woll and Eldon Henson as Karen and Foggy, and also you have John Bernthal back as Punisher. I wonder if Rosario Dawson, I don't actually remember. Honestly, did she die in the original series? I've seen the show, I just don't remember off the top of my head, but if she hasn't, Maybe we'll see Rosario Dawson back again. She's obviously in the Disney family as Ahsoka. So again, it's about the supporting cast. The supporting cast is great in the Daredevil shows. Elektra was awesome. Vanessa Fisk, who's coming back in this new iteration, is great. So really, it's going to be, yes, it's going to be about the main characters, but it's also going to be, let's make sure the supporting characters are a big part of the show and not just cast aside as well. Number 3, third hope. Kingpin and Daredevil stay at odds. It seems like from the promotional material, and it seems like from the clips and things like that they're on a little more of a cordial terms, maybe, enough to sit down together at a coffee shop and talk about things, even though obviously there's a lot of tension in that scene. And I think that that's fine. I'm not saying that Kingpin and Daredevil always have to be fighting every single time they see each other. In fact, I think that the showrunner said something to the effect of, well, yeah, if they're always in a room together, we want to make sure, maybe it's Vincent D'Onofrio actually, he was like, yeah, we want it to be so charged that every single time they're in the same room together, they have to be basically trying to end each other, because that's just how intense their animosity is towards one another. And I think that that's good. Keep it at, high octane tension and make sure that they're at odds. Because what I really don't want out of these two characters, it's not like Thor and Loki, right? I don't want them teaming up, And maybe there's a way that they do it and I go, oh, okay, really good, makes sense. Maybe. I'm open to that possibility, very much open to that possibility. But, I really would much rather have them, they can be on uneasy terms, right, uneasy ground, but still kind of have a mutual understanding of one another while still being at odds. And I think that you still want to build up towards some kind of animosity towards one another. So that's hope number 3. Hope number 4, Matt Murdock is just as important as Daredevil. Again, this kind of goes back to the themes of violence and the themes of characters, but one of the things that's so great about the original series, and one of the things I hope they really carry on into this show, is not just having Matt Murdock be in Daredevil costume the whole time, flipping around and doing somersaults and stuff. Because look, I loved Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, I really liked it, but that cameo from Daredevil was just like, hey, Daredevil's here, and it was awesome, it was great. But I don't want this whole show to just be, hey, Daredevil's here, he's fighting people, he's doing a bunch of stuff, he looks cool in his costume, all that good stuff. I don't want that to happen. Matt Murdock is, I would argue, more important than Daredevil as a character. Not saying that this whole show, because one of the things that we heard from the original cuts before they retooled the entire show was that the original cuts of Daredevil, Boarding End, the show, was that Daredevil was basically non-existent in the first half of the show, and that's not a good thing. You don't want Daredevil just to not show up, right? Again, watching the first couple episodes of season 1 of Daredevil, Daredevil is there. Like, he's not wearing his costume, he has that rudimentary mask over his face, but he's there, right? And he's a big part of the show. So I think that just keeping that balance and making sure Matt Murdock, his Catholicism, his faith, his sense of justice, retribution, all these different things, his blindness and his superpowers, his super abilities, all that goes to making the show really good. That's hope number 4. Hope number 5 is show how Daredevil fits into the New York City, and by Daredevil I mean the show in general, but also the character. Show how he fits into the New York City of the MCU. This is a different New York City, because sure, you can now retroactively say, oh yeah, when they talk about the incident in the Netflix series, that really is definitively, 2012, right, for after the Avengers, and that's good. But this is going to now be more explicitly connected to the MCU. And I want to see, what other street level heroes, because this is now a world where many, many metahumans and superheroes are running around. And I'm not saying that Daredevil should interact with every single MCU. Like, he shouldn't be running around with Moon Knight and She-Hulk and Miss Marvel and Captain America. And no, I'm just saying that he should, be living in a world that acknowledges the state of the MCU, that it's a mess, it's chaotic, the world is crumbling around them, which, by the way, maybe makes it rife for Doctor Doom to show up and take over the world. But the world is a very unstable place. New York is a very dangerous place, or whatever they're going to do. Right? Make sure that you acknowledge the fact that there are street level heroes operating now. There was a big thing in New York City with Kingpin, right? Acknowledge what happened in Hawkeye, just briefly if you have to, or Echo, or whatever. Just make sure that things are being acknowledged and just fit into the MCU. It's now an MCU show, and I hope that he can take advantage of that. So those are my 5 hopes. Now 5 predictions very quickly, and then we will wrap this segment up. Number 1, Spider-Man will be referenced. I don't think he's going to show up. I really don't think he's going to show up, but I think that, going to that last hope, I think that if you're going to talk about how the New York City of the MCU has changed, I think you got to talk about this vigilante who we can't get his identity, but he's crawling around, he's fighting crime, and we got to stop him. So I think Spider-Man will be referenced. Second prediction: the show will end with a hint towards Devil's Reign, which is a very famous comic book storyline which is a very crossover kind of event with Daredevil, or a New York / street level crossover event as well. So it's going to hint towards something that will probably come up after Daredevil Boarding in season 2 and after Avengers Secret Wars, but I think that that's something that we're going to be building towards as well. So that is that. Number 3, Kingpin, on a related note, is going to be the big bad of the street level MCU. Love this idea. I think Vincent D'Onofrio is going to do a great thing. I was a big fan, honestly, at one point of splitting out the MCU a little bit more explicitly into MCU Cosmic, MCU Street Level, MCU Magic, and what Mystic, and whatever. Because I think it just kind of helps, know which characters are going to show up in which corners of the MCU. Well, also, yes, having the big Avengers crossovers. And so I think, having Spider-Man, Daredevil, even Moon Knight can show up if he wants to. But just, street level, right? Street level, I think would be really fun. And I think Kingpin is going to be set up to be a very big bad, like him in the next phase, and then whatever you want to do with the X-Men, if you want to do Apocalypse, or if you want to do Mr. Sinister, whatever you want to do. But I think Kingpin is going to be a part of that. So there is that. Number 4, Punisher will be set up to get his own series again. Pretty self-explanatory. I think that they're going to want to launch that after this show. And number 5, the saddest one of them all, I didn't want to put it here because honestly I just don't want it to happen. I think one of Karen or Foggy is going to die. I do. I think that if we're going darker, which it seems like the showrunner is hinting towards, then yeah, I do think that Karen or Foggy, it's going to be one of the motivating factors, either at the end of Season 1, leading into Season 2, or midway through Season 1, and it's going to be devastating, and I hope that it doesn't happen, because I love those two characters, but I think that I have a sneaking suspicion that this season it's going to happen. So we will see about that. Guys, those are my hopes and predictions for Daredevil Born Again. We will be doing, just like we do with Skeleton Crew, The Penguin, and all these other shows, we're going to be doing spoiler discussions every week and talking about Daredevil Born Again, so get ready for that on the channel. We'll try to do immediate reactions as we can as well. And yeah, guys, look forward to that. What do you think about these hopes and predictions, and what are your own hopes and predictions for the show? Let me know in the comments down below.